Get ready for real conversations, fresh insight, and practical strategies to help you run and grow your shop with confidence. From tackling everyday challenges to scaling with data-driven decisions, this podcast brings you stories and solutions straight from the people who've been there. Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Bay. I'm your host, Peter Cooper. And today I have a guest, Mandy Deveau, and you're with DriveHRIS. Mandy, tell us a little bit about what you do in this industry.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Peter. Yeah, I'm the dealer communication and engagement at DriveHRIS, which it's a part of Dealer Pilot HR. And we have a complete all-in-one software solution for dealerships with advisory services that really touch on the health and safety component, as well as all the people processes that dealerships have. And so we know that there's lots of turnover, lots of retention issues and compliance issues. And that's kind of what we touch on. My experience in the industry is I started off on the sales floor and about almost 16 years ago, I'd say. And I've kind of been in the space for quite some time. I eventually moved over into the marketing piece of things in management. And that's where I find myself now.
So you started off on the sales floor selling cars?
Yeah. And it was like everybody else by accident. I was in university. I was not doing well in university. It was not for me. But I was away from home in a different community. And I didn't want to move back home with my parents. So I need to go get a job. And I saw a job posting. And I decided, you know what, that would be interesting because my grandfather, had a backyard garage. And so he was very rural and he would flip cars for a living. I didn't know much about it, but I'm like, maybe that would be cool. So I decided to apply and I guess the rest is history. But I know it may not seem like there's such a divide, like in this conversation, we're going to talk about it a little bit, I'm sure, about the divide between variable and fixed ops. But ultimately, I've recently started speaking about this book I'm writing, and it's called Earned Influence. And I used all that skill set from selling cars, and I've created this concept or this framework around leadership skills or soft skills that people need to really move themselves through the automotive industry, to be able to go from the sales floor to management and support each other, regardless if you're on the sales floor or on the fixed ops side.
Well, I think that's a big thing we should talk about. And by the way, that's an amazing thing that you stayed in car sales, because I looked up some data and NADA says that 80% of car salesmen don't last the first year.
100%. I can see that, but I would say that my career path was exactly that. I can say the same thing because I've been in several dealerships because I moved. And it's not that I would have left the dealership necessarily, but my circumstance was that I moved from the rural community. I was working at a mom and pop shop. That was my first dealership. I was successful there and I had built a tremendous reputation in the community. People knew who I was. I had created a car show there that was reoccurring. I've done a lot at that dealership, but unfortunately I moved to the other side of the country and there I worked for a large auto group. They had just gone through an acquisition. So the dynamic was really strange. So I was able to really see a lot of that stuff firsthand. Again, I was successful there. That's when I ended up becoming pregnant with my twins. And I decided I don't want to be so far from home having twins. So I moved back home and then I worked for another car dealership down here. So my story is a little bit different as to why I moved and why I had that turnover. But it just plays true that there's always these factors and people will leave. Oftentimes it's culture related. So I could tell you the amount of salespeople I've seen go in and out of dealerships.
Well, and let me steer this a little bit more towards technicians. I firmly believe that our hiring processes for hiring technicians are broken. And the example that I give is I actually spent quite a bit of time in HR. I got injured at a very young age and had to go light duty is what they call this. Had to go work in the office. And I would see the way they would hire technicians. They would look at resumes. They would basically throw them in the trash and say, well, this has got misspellings. It's got typos on it. And what is your opinion on that? Of the way that we hire technicians?
Yeah, with DriveHRIS, we actually have an advisory team. So they're certified award-winning advisors who work with dealerships across North America. So we help our clients with hiring, retention, best practices, and trying to stand out in the market. And we really encourage dealerships to really sell their employer brand and improve it. They need to improve their culture to attract people. And so the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that there's that issue of almost this flywheel problem. So they're not they're trying to solve their retention or their hiring problem, but they're not actually finding the cause of their turnover. So if you're going to put that energy in and you're going to do a subpar job of attracting candidates, then you're going to bring them into the dealership when you haven't adjusted or improved your culture, then you're going to have turnover again. And then you're going to get a bad reputation in the community. Then people aren't going to want to work with you. And so if you're not doing anything to improve your employer brand or your culture, then it doesn't matter what you put forward, you're not going to be able to attract people in. So we're seeing this everywhere. America, Canada, we're seeing it with all dealerships. So that's a huge piece of it that ties into the HR people not necessarily knowing how to put it forward. So if they're just throwing out resumes because they're looking at typos, they're not truly assessing the person. So we definitely need to improve that process. And I think that's opening up the lines of communication with the fixed ops team. But on top of that, there's so many best practices that HR managers could take. They need to not focus on creating those job postings that just talk about all of the tasks that they need to do. Like technicians know what they're being hired for. What they don't know is what makes that dealership or that service bay different. Why would they want to work there? What are the benefits? What makes that shop stand out to attract these A players? That's really it, is that you need to have an A player environment and you need to have an A player process to attract those A players, because they're not going to stay long if they go at all.
Yeah, I think our process is broke. And it seems to be the bigger the organization, the more broken it is. I go into a lot of shops and I talk to the owners or the C-level team, and I ask a very simple question. Why would a technician want to work for you? And they very rarely have an answer. Outside of, they'll say stuff like, well, we pay really good. We have a family atmosphere, which, by the way, I tell people, don't ever use the word family atmosphere. That just means that the technician is going to look at that and say, well, I'm going to be abused. That's what that equates to them. But it is kind of substantial that they don't have an answer to that. And they don't know why people work there. They don't even know why their own employees work there. Some of these owners are so naive, they think the only reason why employees work for them is because they pay really good. And I'm like, you don't pay that good. Like, you pay okay, but you don't pay good enough for me to basically put up the stuff. I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter if you're a plumber. It doesn't matter if you're a carpenter, electrician, an automotive dealership, a heavy duty truck repair. People need to understand why people work for them. And what makes you special?
Yeah, that's something that we offer, like in our solution. We realize that there is a gap there. So we know that there's people who aren't doing regular performance reviews, and they're not doing the career pathing that technicians need. And there's some statistics we were just talking about a few minutes ago about how the importance of helping someone see their future there. So I think it was 20 to 30% retention. Yeah, 20 to 30% higher retention compared to those that don't have a path. So those elements are missing. So the performance reviews, the career pathing, doing the regular check-ins with your team to get your net promoter score. That's how you're going to learn these elements that make your shop different and what's going to make people excited to come work for you and keep people there for a long time. And I don't know if that's really happening. Like, in your experience, have you seen a lot of shops that are actually taking this pulse check of their employees? Like,
no,
we do.
And they don't. And what they do is they claim that they do it, but when you really dive down on it and ask specific questions, like give me a date and a time, they missed it. I do want to ask 100%. A question, back up about something that you said there. Net promoter score. Can you explain what that is? Because that is something that no one talks about in this industry.
Yeah. So the net promoter score is realistically like the score. I don't know all the criteria exactly how it works, but the concept is that you have a survey that you give to your team, and then you're able to tell where they're happy. And the way that our system works is, the only way I can really explain it is that we have a survey that goes to the manager and they say, this person is this engaged, this person has a good attitude, this person seems motivated. Those are just rough examples of questions. And then the employee gets the same survey. And then they answer the questions. And then if there is a disconnect between the two, then you're able to see that and be like, okay, I'm seeing this, but they're feeling this. And the whole goal of that survey is we can then predict, is that person slowly leaving? Is that person checking out? Are they not loyal to us? Do they not feel good about their role? Something's missing here. This is flagging to me. I need to touch base with them. But ultimately, the goal of the net promoter score is that you create a score to say whether they would say to other people to work there. So are they pro your company? Are they promoting people to come work with you? Are they neutral? Are they just happy to be there and doing their job and leaving at the end of the day? Or do they not care? Are they the people who are like having a bad attitude, the grumpy people, and not making it a great environment for everybody else?
Well, and I think that's something too that a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on. And that is, You spend thousands of dollars on Indeed and these other platforms to hire. And yet the cheapest, most inexpensive, most valuable tool you have is your own people. And no one even, I was dealing with a client the other day and they're like, well, we're hiring for this position. I said, you are? Really? They're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, I went to your website and it's not saying you're hiring for a tech at this location. I said, and then, I've talked to a couple of your employees this week because I was on site and they're like, they didn't know you were hiring. And I'm like, we really need to talk about this, guys.
Yeah.
You are not in alignment with your people. But I think that's a valid point. When you ask your people, meaning your frontline employees, and you ask management to find out if they're in alignment. Because I think so many places disregard the fact that an employee's perception is their reality.
Yes, that is true everywhere for everything. Perception is that person's reality.
And I think that plays into another question I'm going to ask, and that's about tech pay. And you said that, you have some stats that say that if people know their path, they're more likely to stay. How do you judge in your industry in the way that you do things, whether or not a dealership or a shop is paying correctly? Is there tools that are out there to see if people are competitive?
Yeah, there definitely are. And I think it's really taking a look at your backyard and having conversations and see what's competitive in the market there. The great debate, and it's so interesting. Like I was telling you earlier, I was talking to a technician in Australia last night, and we were talking more about the apprenticeship program, because Canada, I think it was South Africa and Australia all have the mandatory programs. And so we were just discussing those things. And the question I had to ask them, do you have flat rate there? Like, they have technician shortages there right now. They have the flat rate issue right now. And so many people, even his sentiment was so anti-flat rate. So I think that's the part where I'm seeing such a mixed review. So regardless, if you look in your backyard to get the most accurate information of what are people paying competitively, what are the bonuses that they are doing, what are the advantages that you're seeing in the competitive market rate around you? Because that is the best place to look. And it's actually reaching out and having conversations with people. The issue is there's still that great debate. Is it going to be flat rate or hourly? How do we work if we have someone new coming into the shop that's green that we need to train? Like, there's so many moving pieces I've seen in the last few weeks of people talking about on LinkedIn with me that I don't know if there's any one way that's the right way. So I'm very interested if you could comment on what you're seeing and what you think would be the good way.
There's two things. I don't care what other people are paying. It's just like I don't care what my competition charges per hour. I've got to pay what I need to pay to get what I need. And then the same thing with charging rates. I can tell you that one of my greatest accomplishments in running business was that I stopped trying to tell people what they're worth. And what do I mean by that? I would have an employee, a technician, they weren't an employee yet. They would come sit down and we'd have a meeting, part of the interview process. And I would ask them, how much do you want to make? And the answer was always, well, so-and-so down the street offered me $27 an hour. And I said, that's not what I'm talking about. How much do you want to make? Do you want to make $100,000 a year? Do you want to make $200,000 a year? You tell me. Write a number on the piece of paper. And then I would pull out my sheet because I had a path and I would slide it across to him and say, whatever amount of money you want, we'll get there together. Like, I will show you how to do it. And I would tell him it's not going to be easy. Like, I'm not going to just give you 200 grand a year. But if you want to make 120 grand a year, it is absolutely doable. That is obtainable. It is not that hard to do. Probably 90% of them were speechless. They had never been asked, how much do you want to make? They always equated they equated money with their worth. And their worth was what someone else put a value on. And it got me thinking that our system is broken, and flat rate is part of the problem. And I've seen it on both sides. I've seen it as an owner. I was a technician for 20 years and I worked in dealerships. I've done everything from working at a Ducati motorcycle dealership to working on, multi-million dollar cranes. And our pay structure is broken from the standpoint. When I'm sitting in an interview and we decide how much you're going to pay me, I have no idea what you're capable of, and you have no idea what you're coming to work for. So honestly, I'm crazy. I think what I did was I would not hire someone unless they did what I called a practical interview. If they were not willing to come work in my shop for a day, I would not hire them.
That's fair.
And I would tell people, in today's society too, owners have to understand, you are not interviewing the technician. They are interviewing you. That guy's already got 5 or 6 offers. And the one thing you can do to stand out in your industry is say, look, this is the way I would sell it to him. This is going to be a win-win situation. You're going to come work for a day in the shop. You can interview. your coworkers. You can look at the way it is in real world. Like I can walk you around the shop and everybody's on their best behavior and it's BS. You come spend 8 hours here, you'll know what it's like. And it's a win-win because either you're going to walk out of here with a handful of cash and a job offer, or you'll walk out of here with a handful of cash. Either way, I don't expect you to do it for free. And we would have them come work a whole 8-hour shift. And I'll be honest, there were some guys, my lead tech would come to me after about 2 hours and say, cut this guy loose. He's not going to fit. Like he showed up in sweatpants and a man bun. He's not going to fit in here.
That's so interesting.
The man bun, but
yeah, for real. But the thing that you didn't mention here is that you're the unicorn. So you're thinking outside of the box. And so that's what I say about people on LinkedIn. When I see dealer principals or I see service managers, fixed ops, whatever, those people who are commenting on the post on LinkedIn and having conversations and they're doing something innovative, those are the unicorns that think outside the box and aren't relying on this is the way it's always been done. So for you, you see the value in that. And I think the conversation that we need to have next is how do we get more unicorns or more people thinking outside the box and seeing the value? Because what you were doing there was really allowing your team and the potential hire to really connect and kind of test each other more. So I bet you that you had a very high retention rate.
I did. And there's another thing that we found out that happened that we did not intend. And that was that our other employees had better buy-in on this person because they were part of the process. And I would tell people flat out, I'm not going to make you work with someone you don't want to work with. So if everybody comes to me, and it was more of a advisory type thing, but if 4 or 5 guys came to me and said, we don't think this guy's going to fit here, I wouldn't hire him because I'm not going to force you to work with someone you don't want to work with. Now, there were guys, some people would nitpick on a couple of things. I'm like, okay, we can get over this. But mostly it was pretty unanimous. And then once we hired that person, they all had buy-in. They were vested in making sure this person succeeded. And it was pretty amazing how it changed. It really changed our culture. And I think one of the bigger hurdles is when I sold my company and merged with a larger organization, I swear to God, HR was the vein of my existence. Like every time I tried to do something new or creative, HR would stand in the way. And they would say like, well, you can't do practical interviews anymore. Why? Well, because he's not an employee yet. I said, and? Like I had a different background because I understood things like how work comp insurance works. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if they're an employee or not. Well, they don't have coverage. Yes, they do. That's not how work comp insurance works. They would say things like that. And I don't think most people in that situation that are in middle management, which is what I would call what I did, don't have the background to go to HR and be like, no, that's not right. Guys, you're wrong. And do it respectfully, of course, but say, I actually had to tell HR, your job is to fill employees and you're not doing it. So I'm going to go do my thing and just, let's get along with this. Stop trying to be, somehow you've got to figure out how, if you're middle management, you work with an organization to stop them from being a barrier and try to get them along the path and get them to understand, look, what we're doing is not working. There is a shortage. There are 10 jobs for every technician plus. And it's the same way with social media posts. I tell owners of stores and facilities, if 30% of your time on social media is not spent showing the world why this is a great place to work, that's why you have a hiring problem.
100%. And that's coming back to building that social proof, that credibility, really people being able to see your employer brand. And that's going to attract candidates to you. And I think that all of it goes together. There's the one thing about the auto industry, and again, I'm still mind blown from that conversation last night with the guy in Australia. They have the exact same problems. Other side of the world, same problems. So you have to consider a lot of people, and I'm going to speak specifically to the automotive industry. I'm not 100% certain on the heavy duty side, but in a dealership, a lot of times there's 2 paths to become a service manager. And it's either you come from a technician side, you understand the technician piece, or you come from the admin side and you're going through the service side as the advisory side. And I recently just interviewed a manager who came from the receptionist and now she's the assistant service manager. And so she went through the warranty and then advisory. So you have to consider what's the path to get to HR in a dealership. So it's not always someone who's certified. It's not always someone who has the background. It's often someone who is the receptionist who did admin work and then someone who needs to fill the gap. And sometimes it's the controller. So it just depends on the size of your dealership. So you have to make sure that you have resources and tools. And that's the biggest component of the advisory service that we offer is to help dealerships that are in that situation. So we help with the escalations. We help with any kind of termination, any kind of harassment case, any kind of like stop work orders. So say that the Ministry of Labor comes in and they're like, hey, you're not compliant here. That's the kind of problem that we help support. Like have to realize that there's a lot of people who are taking on roles who may not know things. So for you to have the wherewithal to be able to push back to that, to get the result that you need, again, you're the unicorn. So how do we get more people to think this way and have this skill set and have this knowledge?
I think that it's the same thing, the problem we have with employees in general. And that's that very few employees have figured out what's in it for them. Like as an employee, I knew what was in it for me. And of course, I had a different background than most because I had ran multiple businesses and I had worked in HR, which was a very interesting. But through my career, I never chased the paycheck. I chased the experience. Like I left a union job. I was a journeyman at 26 years old. I was a journeyman. I was top pay, but I was also top pay. I was never going to go anywhere. And I left one union to join another union as an apprentice and took a $10 an hour pay cut because I knew that experience would ultimately pay off. And I think so many people won't invest in themselves.
Yes.
But to really expand on your question with HR, how do you do it with HR? Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. Most people in HR are not qualified, just like most managers are not qualified. And what do I mean by that? A lot of people have their position by defact, especially in medium-sized organizations. It's just attrition. Somebody quit, they were the next in line, basically they became service manager.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong with that is employers don't give people the tools they need to be successful. Because I think ultimately they don't understand it. And you don't have to be, to be a service manager, you don't have to be the best technician. And ultimately, when I've seen them take the best technician and make a service manager, they do a disservice in two ways. Number one, they lost their most productive tech. And number two, now everybody in the shop's angry because this person's blatantly, they're just a jerk. Mm-hmm. They're not a manager. And I think we need to evaluate when we hire people, the skill set. Another example of that, I would have a fight almost every week with HR. There was not an established timeline that HR was supposed to background check an employee. We would have somebody, we wanted to hire them, and it was like a week to do a background check. And I said, no, it's 24 hours. And they said, what do you mean? I said, you have 24 hours. If you can't give me a thumbs up or thumbs down in 24 hours, you're out of time. I'm moving on. And they didn't like me very much, but I'm like, no, you have a limit. And if you can't make this happen in 24 hours, you need to go find a new vendor. Because this is not acceptable. Because this guy's going somewhere else. Like we can't change the fact that this guy's got 10 job offers. So if we can't jump on it, same way with if someone sends in an interest or a resume, if you don't respond to them in 24 hours, I guarantee you're losing that person.
Oh, 100%. And that's really the foundation. Like we have an ATS, so an applicant tracking system built right into our software. And that's a huge component of it. We have workflows on the back end to really streamline the whole process. So we helped our dealerships build out their job descriptions. So we get them posted. Everything's connected. You're able to get it out there on Indeed. And all of the stuff stays internal. You're able to have the questions. You're able to filter out. We're about to launch our AI that is going to help them to be able to parse their resumes, to be able to get a summary of what's happening. So it's a little bit more than just, here's some typos. Like we're really able to assess these candidates and give them the criteria of what we're looking for. But what's amazing is you need to have automations. Like I know we have so much technology, but to be able to push a button and say, hey, I like this candidate. Here's an offer letter. Push the button, do the background check, push the button, send me your references. Like we are that streamlined. And that's what dealerships need now because that technology exists. So because it exists, if you want to be competitive, you need to be up there and be fast with speed because we see it ourselves and we're a SaaS company. So it doesn't matter really the industry right now. If you want quality candidates, when they put their name out there, they want like a player service back. They want to be talked to like that. They want
and that's
to be
the other thing too. That's the way that you introduce yourself to that person, that this is how we do things. So if you take a week to get back to them, you're disorganized, you say you'll call them back, you don't call them back. If the hiring process is a month long, I'm sorry, guys, it should not be that hard for someone to apply for a job. If they go in and apply, they should give you about 5 details of information. Like me, I'm not giving you my social security number on a job application. Just not going to happen. I'm not giving you that information until you're actually serious. And I think a lot of places need to learn that. It doesn't have to be that complicated to start the conversation.
No,
some of these barriers, I don't know what it is like for you, what you've seen on your end, but what I've seen on my end, applying for a job, it's like you're doing a lot of work for free.
Absolutely. Like I've had some interviews in the past, obviously, but like I've had to go through, do different personality tests. I've had to go through and do different problem solving and different things like that. And you're making me go through all this work just to go somewhere. And I don't know if I want to work for you. I don't know enough about you. I'm doing all these steps and going through all these hoops, but I'm not really sure this is a good fit. And so I think that part's really frustrating. And then on top of that, we haven't even touched on once they get through that and they're like, hey, we like you, or the candidate wants to move forward with you. Once they do, what are we doing? What is that impression like? So we really need to consider, and there's so many stats around it. I don't know if I have any handy. I can get you some, but there are stats about the importance of onboarding because that is the first experience of them working with you. And you need to make sure that you get that right. Make sure that they know what they're doing. They come ready. They don't show up the first day and they're not productive. Like there's so many elements and key pieces that people really need to consider with the onboarding. And right now people literally have like a paper checklist, or they're scrambling around once that person gets there and be like, oh no, you're new? Okay, great. Let me get you something.
Yeah. And that was my big pet peeve. And I had a very small shop in the grand scheme of things. I had 13 employees, but I had an entire onboarding process and people thought I was insane. I ran that place like it was a 200 employee operation and they knew where to park. They had an email address. They had all their information. They had logins. They had a training path. Like we would say, okay, this is what's going to happen. The first day, you're not going to do anything. You're going to get your toolbox here. You're going to meet everybody. You're going to spend an hour with each position in the building. People thought I was crazy. I would literally take a mechanic and I'd make them sit with accounting for an hour. Why? Because what you do matters and what they do matters. And you guys all have to work together. I'd make them work in the service advisor office for a couple hours. I'd make them work in parts for a couple hours so they could see things like when you request a widget, nobody knows what a widget is. So you got to be specific. And I think the hiring practice, I want to hit on that, is the same thing. I would literally look at a technician in the eyes after they would say, I want to come work here. And I would say, I'm not going to make you a job offer. And they would look at me and say, what? I'm like, hear me out. You're leaving a job because you don't like the environment. You don't like where you work. You don't like the people. You don't like the boss, whatever it is. And by then I knew what it was because we've been talking. And I would say, this is how this is going to go. You're going to accept my job offer. You're going to commit to a date. You're going to go back to your employer. He's going to throw a couple bucks at you and you're going to stay. And they would say, whoa, no. And I'm like, no, that's what's going to happen. I've been doing this for a long time. I said, so here's what I want you to go home and think about before we even talk any farther. If I offered you more money than them, would that change all of the problems you're facing at your current employer? And they would say no. I said, well, then just remember, if they offer you more money, it's not going to change your current condition. So before you accept my job, I want you to go back to your current employer and I want you to tell them that you're not happy and that you want to leave. And then if whatever they do doesn't convince you to stay, then call me up and I'll make you an offer.
And so would they do it?
Well, a lot of times they would stay, but it's the same number of people that would take my offer. We'd commit to a date. We'd do all this work. And then they would basically, I don't know, turn into a pansy and never tell us they weren't starting, never show up for the first day. And you call them and they'd be like, oh, well, I just stayed where I'm at. I can't tell you how many people I hear talk about that, that it happens. And I'm like, well, the easy way to stop that is just make sure that they're really committed to the job. Stop trying to make them an offer and think that you've got them on the hook. Let's actually, when you get them in the boat, that's when you've got the fish. The fish doesn't count until it's in the boat. And
we say that it's the same thing when selling cars. It doesn't count until it's over the curb, burning gas.
And I think too many people in the hiring process need to remember that this is a big life change for them. And you're asking them to turn their whole life upside down. They've got to move their toolbox, which, let's face it, that's a big thing for a technician. It's not like a person that works in the office or a salesman that's got 2 pictures of his kid on the desk and they walk out in 10 minutes. Like, it's a big ordeal to move your toolbox. Like, I remember when I moved my toolbox, I broke the tow truck. So, I mean, it's not easy to do this. And I think so many people in the administration just don't understand what is the hiring experience for the employee. Does anybody ever talk about that in your industry?
Yeah, we do. That's why we have such an emphasis on onboarding. And we created this widget, and we actually call it like the onboarding wizard. And it's once someone gets started, they get this in advance and they're able to log in and they're really able to do their training, fill out their information, and we're really able to set the tone for that experience because we know that means something. So when people are able to go through, know exactly what to expect, once they get there, they know what they're doing, they have their business cards are ready for them, their desk is all set up for them, or whatever it be, that has impact because like you said, it sets the tone. And it's so important that they know what they're getting into. And we hear that all the time. And that's the best practice that we recommend to our dealers is that we make sure that they care about everything because it means something to the person. And if you want to attract those A players that are going to stick around, you need to show them because it's about building that culture and leading by that example. Because so many times, like when I first started selling cars, I had a desk. At this point, we did not have computers at our desk, but I had a desk, some brochures, and my sales manager gave me a sales book. And I literally taught myself from scratch how to sell. I mapped it out on a piece of paper, and I would walk around the car in my mind, and I would think about all the features and the benefits and whatever. And I sat at a computer in the back room doing the OEM training. Like there was no process there. I didn't know much. And then you're left to kind of figure that out. And so after a while, I easily could have left because, the old sales guys beside me who have been there for years were whispering in my ear. And me being a young woman salesperson coming in at 23, I had a lot to fight against. And it was an experience in itself for a dealership to not put thought into how that person's going to perceive that dealership and the people. You're not controlling the outcome in any way.
Yeah, and I think that's something people need to learn. Just ask.
Yes.
New employees are very powerful. You need to ask new employees a lot of questions because they have their perspective is pretty unbiased. They don't have a 20-year bias from working there. They don't know that the last owner or the last manager did it this way. All they know is what they see today, and that's what really matters. And that's something I want to, leads me into another question. I'm a firm believer, and I've seen some of the stats from not only from some of the stuff that Fulbe has done, but from what Wrenchway has done. And I don't think we have a hiring problem in our industry. I think we have a retention problem.
100%. Because realistically, I think like we were just talking all these examples of people who can come in and get hired and do these things, but they're jumping from job to job. And it's because we're not doing those elements with the culture and we're not giving them the things that they need. We're not helping them feel heard. And it's so interesting. So I had some post on LinkedIn that recently blew up, and the context was really talking about the cost of turnover of a technician. And so many technicians came out of the woodwork to comment on these posts. And they were saying that it's not about pay, even though they don't feel that flat rate works for them. Like literally 99% of the technicians are saying that. Their concern isn't pay. Their concern is feeling respected. Their concern is feeling valued. Their concern is like having the tools and the resources they need to move forward. And they feel like they're taken for granted because the amount of time and energy and things that they've put into their knowledge base and their experience that can't just be manufactured out of a book or out of AI, they just don't feel valued. And that's a huge component of what I've seen based off of these conversations, for sure.
I think it's twofold from what I've seen. It's facts and feelings.
Oh, yes.
And part of the problem is so many shops don't quantify things. And I have this saying, and people they don't understand it at first. But if you don't know what good is and you don't know what bad is, you don't know what you have. And so if you haven't clearly defined what good in your organization means, in other words, what does good mean to be a tech? If you haven't given your tech KPIs, and I always try to keep it down to 3. If you haven't given your tech KPIs, how do they know how they're doing in any given moment in time? And do they have access to that information? So many of these software systems, the technician can't see how many hours they flagged. They literally still have to write it down on a piece of paper, and it's guessing. Like they don't know what they've been given credit for. They don't know what the job, they usually know what the job pays because it's on the ticket, but they have no way to add it all up at the end of the week to know whether or not I think there's a lot of mistrust, and it's around data, because so many of the guys that I talked to when I would interview them, they always felt like they were somehow got the short end of the stick.
Yeah. I could see that, because I hear the same thing that they do, especially people with more experience. I hear people say like, if they learn more, that they're not necessarily making more. And if they learn more, they end up getting more responsibilities. And so then they end up not necessarily, their pay doesn't always reflect that. I think that's really interesting. I'm thinking if there is a solution I can think of off the top of my head, because they track their hours in their DMS, don't they? Like when they're logging their hours.
They do, but the technician doesn't always have access to the information, is what I'm saying. A lot of times they have to go to the service writer or the service manager, and they have to tell them what the numbers are. Like we'll use an example, Fulbe, which is a software just for heavy duty, but the technician at any time has what they call the technician homepage, and they can see their stats in real time. And not only can they see their stats, it ranks them every day and every week, and it shows them where they're at in the shop ranking. Like it gamifies it and shows them, hey, you're the number 1 billing tech today, which doesn't always translate to tomorrow, but as a whole, and it doesn't tell you who the other guy is. It just gives you a 1, 2, 3. I really like that idea. But the point of it is so many shops I'll walk into and I'll talk to owners, and then I'll talk to the technicians, and the owners got one set of standards that he's judging guys on. And then the technicians have another set of standards they're using to judge their own performance, and the alignment's not there. Not everybody's on the same page. And it
100%.
seems like this so simple of an idea, but people have to understand the average human being has to be exposed to an idea 7 times before they understand it. And so if you don't have a cascading message in your organization that these are the numbers that we quantify things with. Now, keep in mind, you got to make sure they understand you're not just a number. But let's face it, in our society, numbers matter. And numbers are facts. And so we're going to judge some things off these facts. We're also going to judge other things like how well you get along with your peers. And we're going to do monthly or quarterly surveys to judge that. I think all that has to be spelled out. I think people have to be told that when they're hired. Look, these are our expectations of you. We need, and I would tell technicians very simply, I only need 3 things. I need 32 billed hours a week, which equates to 80% efficiency. And I want your utilization above 90%. If you do all those things, you will make crazy money. Just the same way I would tell a service manager, I only need 3 things from you. I need 80,000 a week in gross sales per shop. I need 62% gross margin. I need happy customers.
And do you think that a lot of shops know those numbers and they know exactly what to kind of bring back to their technicians?
No.
Yeah.
They blatantly don't. Especially small and medium-sized, what I would call mom and pop operations, generational shops. Generational shops are the worst because they'll have a technician say, well, he's my best tech. And I'd say, okay, well, who's number 5? Say you got 10 technicians in your organization. I love doing this test. I'll go to an owner and say, okay, I need you to rank 1 through 10. Who are your best techs? And I wouldn't tell them what best meant. That's another problem. What does good mean? And they would give me a list and I'd say, okay, let's go pull the numbers. And they were usually right on number 1, but they were always wrong on number 3. And what you found out was this lube tech that does, he does oil changes, does tires, may be your number 2 or number 3 gross revenue tech, meaning he's actually billing more than the guy that you think is a solid B tech. And we're talking dollars because there is the difference between revenue dollars and profit, right? Because let's face it, a tire guy is not the most profitable guy on numbers, percentages, because tires just don't have margins. But my point is that guy's busting his butt. He's doing a great job. He's killing it. And everybody treats him like a rented mule because he's just like, well, he's just the apprentice. He's not worth anything. But he is. He's worth more than you can ever understand. And nobody's recognizing it because nobody's paying attention to the numbers.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. I had just done a post the other day and it was talking about the real numbers that they think that variable is what's driving revenue into the dealership. Like it's so important and we celebrate it so much because it is really important. But all of the revenue is really coming from, because in sales, I think it was like 88% was coming from the sales side. And then the service was 12% of sales. But when you look at the profit, the revenue that's actually being generated, it's more 50-60% is coming from service from that 12% of sales. So
and depending on, it depends on what it is, meaning which industry, whether automotive, heavy duty equipment.
Yeah.
But the ratios, I actually was very interesting. Early in my career, I sat on a plane for 5 hours next to a guy that's all he did was a shop consultant for dealerships. And in a lot of ways, I hate dealerships because they put all the emphasis on the shiny stuff. They put all the emphasis on new car sales and used car sales because they're like, well, that's where all the revenue is. And it's absolutely right. Your gross revenue does come from that, but your margins are crap. And you look at it in a lot of dealership groups, over 50%, some of them up to 80% of their total profit net comes from the service department. And yet those people are treated like second-class citizens. I mean, really, they're the ones carrying everybody and nobody sees it.
100%. It is so crazy to me that there just seems to be such a disconnect in the mindset and that silos and all of that stuff. I think one element, I've heard some other successful leaders say this, like it was Devin Callback, and he had his dealership has won Best Place to Work 2 years in a row, awarded by Auto News Canada. And I asked him, what do you do? How did you break down your silos between your departments? And it's really helping his team understand the big picture, having everyone involved in meetings. So not a lot of meetings because he doesn't believe in a lot of meetings, but when you do have meetings, you have everyone involved. And then he broke down the silos and I said, how did you do that? And he said, we literally don't have walls. So his whole dealership is kind of open inside. And then people are able to hear what's happening in all the departments. And then they're able to better understand each other and support each other and know what's happening. So to me, that was so interesting that the physical aspect of not having walls is what was needed to break down silos. And there really is such a divide from the front of the house and the back of the house. And you see that in restaurants, you see that in other industries, but we really need to adjust that mindset. I think everyone needs to be aligned on the same vision, the same goal. Those are just basic leadership skills. Once you can give someone the why and the reason of what we're working towards, and I'm not trying to be all like Simon Sinek, but it's like you really need to be able to let your people know what we're working towards so they can buy into the idea. And then from there, that allows them to have the autonomy to make the right decisions, use their own discernment to get us closer to that. They're going to thrive. They're going to get you better results.
And I think that hits on a good point, and that is, the new catchphrase in management is vision. You got to sell the vision. You got to sell the vision. And I tell a lot of people, I think that's very important. I think it's very important to show people the path. And that's the reason I have a picture of a mountain behind me, is I always tell people, as long as you can see the top of the mountain, you'll always know you're going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
The problem people lose is they don't sell the why. And they don't sell appreciation of coworkers. Perfect example, what you're talking about, the divide between what I call the front and the back. Same thing happens in restaurants. You got the front of the house and the back of the house. And that's that the tech has no idea what the service advisor does, so they don't appreciate it because they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And the service advisor doesn't understand what the technician does, so they don't appreciate it. And then you start having all this ill will within an organization, things break down, and I think it has to do with a lot with mutual respect. And that has to be something that, there has to be a touchy-feely side to management. Early on in my career, I was a horrible manager because I was just a jerk. And I actually told an employee once, if you need a tickle and a hug, you're in the wrong place. I'm not that guy. It was not surprising that guy doesn't work for me anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
And you have to learn that supporting your employees is the most important thing you do. And it's not just about supporting them in their job. It's supporting them as a person. You have to see them as a human. We're not employing robots. We're employing humans with real human problems. And I can't tell you how many employees I've lost that were good employees that became very bad employees quickly because of home problems. And I have to tell, especially tow truck companies, I said, if you want a more perfect recipe for a guy to get divorced, have him work 6 days a week, 10 hours, 12 hours a day. And then you wonder why your burnout and your attrition rate is so high in this industry.
Yeah, we talk a lot about like the work-life balance. And that's one of the key things that keeps coming up for technicians, is that's something that's really important. And I know that you've recently talked to Joshua, and the mental health component as well that comes into technicians is them being one of the top industries that really struggle with that. I'm really curious, what do you think, or what have you done? Because you're that unicorn who seems to think outside the box. What were you doing to help your team have that work-life balance?
I try to treat them like real people. So here's what I tell people. You can use the word family all you want, and you can kick that word around. But last time I checked, families actually cared about each other as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I did crazy stuff. You want to talk about unicorn stories? My mom had a house across the street from the shop, and we literally went to grandma's house 3 days a week for lunch.
Oh, wow. I love that.
And I would tell people, a lot of places you're going to go interview are going to talk about family, but last time I checked, families eat together. So we would literally shut down the shop. One person was left. It was usually an office person, just to make sure customers didn't show up. And we went to grandma's house. And I know everybody can't do that, but I knew that's what made me special as a shop and as an owner. And the same thing goes with employees. If you do not know what's going on in your employees' lives, you're going to absolutely be blind struck when the guy comes in and says, I'm getting a divorce. I just can't do this. Or a guy has a mental breakdown. And I have so many stories of that because I hired a lot of vets. I believed in that. And sometimes you have to look out for their best interest, even if they aren't. Like I had an employee one time that I literally had to tell, he had really bad anxiety and it was causing really bad high blood pressure problems. And he was a vet and he just would not go to the doctor, and we knew that he had high blood pressure because he couldn't pass the medical for his commercial driver's license. And so he just kind of ignored it. And I finally told him one day, I'm like, you're going today, whether you go or, basically it was get in the truck. We're going. Where are we going? We're going to the hospital. Like you're going to go see a doctor today. Like I literally had to force him into it. And it's a long story. It ends up, it was more than high blood pressure. Had I not done that, he would have never gone. He would have waited till he had a heart attack or a stroke. And this kid wasn't that old. He was in his 30s. But that's the kind of stuff that nobody does anymore. Nobody treats people that way.
Yeah, I'm right there with you because that's the same thing with my management style. And like I talk about so many different little things about understanding people and being able to communicate and get buy-in in the book that I wrote. But I literally practice that every day. And with the team that I lead now at my company, we're all still automotive, but I know that we're SaaS, but my account manager was moving and I could sense her stress. And what I did as a manager was I tried to help her have that work-life balance and understand, like, girl, You don't need to stress about the stuff like nothing's on fire. Nothing, you need to stop because no one's holding you to any kind of measure right now. We all understand the circumstance you're moving. You have a lot on your plate. There's stuff going on. She had other things going on with her children or whatever. Like she didn't have the ability to kind of turn it off because she felt high pressure of wanting to deliver. And so I had to step up and just say, look, enough. Like you're cool. You're good. It's handled. This is the bare minimum that you need to do for me. She's like, okay, great. Thank you. And then I just got so much praise afterwards of the appreciation that I understood where she was coming from. I was able to hear her and see her, and she recognized that. And I know that that's creating loyalty, and that's going to keep the retention because not every day is a rainbow and parade. So it's really important that you're building in those times of need that they're feeling seen and heard, because at the end of the day, you're creating that loyalty that they're going to stay with you.
One of the big tips that I push people on is we always want certain numbers, we strive for it. But are we looking backwards at historical data? Like, can you literally tell that an employee's slipping?
Yes.
And I tell people, look at the numbers.
Performance reviews that we were talking about earlier. That's what's important. Doing those net promoter scores. So that's how our surveys are built, that over time we can look back at these trends and that way we can be predictive. So we can see what our turnover is going to be. We can predict that, hey, on average, our people stay in this position for 3 or 4 years. How can we improve that? These are the trends we're seeing. And so without having an actual system and performing these things, and we make things so simple because a lot of people stress and they have reminders and they have paper-based systems or whatever. You need automation. You need something that's going to prompt you, that's going to remind you, that's going to have everything ready for you to go, and is going to just make it easy at your fingertips. And that's what we believe in, and that's what we do. And I think that embracing that technology, we're all talking about AI right now and how that can come in and change everyone's lives, and we're worried it's going to take jobs. But let's look at the technology that is available that could really make a difference.
And I think that's key. It's key to sales. I've learned this because I had a sales job at a dealership at one point in time too. Consistency is the key to everything.
Yes.
And so many technicians and so many employees that I've interviewed felt undervalued because reviews got missed. I cannot tell you, I swear to God, that is the number one pet peeve when it comes to that issue of pay and things like that, is that you say we're going to do reviews on January 1st, you better do reviews on January 1st.
Oh,
like nothing
100%.
is more important than, and that's what I think we have a problem with accountability in management. You know, we talk about accountability a lot in management, but who are you accountable to? I ask owners that. I said, who are you accountable to? And they just look at me and they can't answer. I'm like, you're accountable to your employees. You have to be accountable to them. If you tell them that, hey, budget wise, we're not going to buy that thing until the first of the year, tax reasons, whatever it is, we're going to buy a piece of equipment. If the first of the year you don't have that thing bought, they should be able to hold you accountable. Like I would have employees, they would come into my office like the third day after the year and they'd be like, hey, you told us that you were going to order that. And I'd be like, yep, here's a piece of paper. It's ordered. We're just waiting for shipping. Like they trusted that if I said I was going to do something, it got done. And I want to say that's probably one of the biggest downfalls that I see in management is promises made, but promises not kept. And I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's you promise them after the first of the year, you're repainting the bathroom. You've got to document it and you've got to do it.
100%. And I think to go alongside that consistency piece is that dealerships think that the one thing that I see over and over again is that 30-day mindset, because sales resets after 30 days. So everything, and that was the joke as a salesperson, is that nothing mattered. You're a hero till the end of the month. The first of the next month, you're at the bottom and it doesn't matter. You're a nobody again and you got to work really hard. So when dealerships get a good idea, they're like, hey, they try to have this unicorn moment. They're going to try to do something to really build that culture and do whatever. They do it once. It's consistency. It's literally thinking long-term, having the commitment to do things over and over again. That's how they're going to build culture. It's not just saying, oh, well, we're going to do something different this time and then do it that one time and not stick with it. Like, oh, that really worked for us. But then they forget. The next month rolls around. That's no longer a priority. It's no longer on their radar. So without proper systems in place, without anything really keeping them accountable to themselves too, they're not able to really improve their culture. They're not able to do anything really consistently.
And so many people talk about culture and how they want to improve it or how they have it. And people need to understand, you have a culture whether you've created it or not. You've either created it intentionally or you've created it by accident. But either way, your shop's got a culture. Your office, your sales floor, everything in any industry, you have a culture. The real question is can you objectively actually go and evaluate the culture you currently have? Because you can't fix it until you know what you have.
I literally just had this conversation. If you do not measure it, you cannot improve it. how do you know where the problem is if you're not measuring everything? And I mean, there's obviously processes and strategies around that, but that is literally a conversation I had last night at my own work. Like, you really need to make sure that you know what's going on. And so that way you can improve that experience.
So what tools are out there though for a smaller organization? Maybe it's a small shop, 5 employees. They can't afford to go buy a whole software system like what you have. What tools do they have available to them to assess these things?
The thing with us is that we are flexible. Like, we have worked with some shops that are quite small, and we do find a solution for them. Maybe they don't need all the modules, but we're flexible and we're there to work for dealerships that need these kinds of solutions. We think that this is so important for the industry. We only work with automotive. Like, that is 100% our focus, is that we deal with dealerships across like North America, and it doesn't matter the size. They could be really big or really small. We have a way that our solution will work for them, including the advisory team. Because the rules and the regulations, especially when it comes around health and safety, are different based off the size of the dealership. It's different based off of what state or what province they're in. And we accommodate that with our team of certified advisors who help those people above and beyond. So it really it doesn't matter the dealership size. It's really just being able to have those resources. And I think it's raising their hand to say, hey, we acknowledge there's something wrong here. We really want to improve X, Y, and Z and put some processes in place. And it's just having a conversation. Like, I'll have a conversation with anybody. It doesn't matter the size of your dealership. I will have a conversation with them and let them know what resources are available and see how we can help them out. Like, I think it's so important.
I think that's a really valid point too. And that's, you have to admit you have a problem. I tell a lot of people, and they really don't like me when I use this analogy, but I say it's like being an alcoholic. You're never going to get better unless you admit you have a problem. And so many people live in this fantasy world. They're like, well, that's not a problem. And I think everybody's probably either experienced or worked for a manager that thinks this sweeps everything under the rug, that every time you bring them a problem, they're like, oh, that's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's not, that's what I call pretend normal. It's actually a psychology thing. Pretend normal is very dangerous in business.
Yes. Culture. And it's just, no one realizes the trend. But if you look at people who have major podcasts and talk to very successful dealership owners, like the car dealership guy, he has tremendously successful dealership owners, large groups, medium groups. They all talk about culture. I don't care what anyone says. A lot of people are like, oh, that's not important here, or culture's fine, or whatever. Like, no, all of those people pay close attention to their culture and 100% attribute it to their success. So I think that that's a huge element that people are missing out on if they're not paying attention. They're just kind of reading between the lines and just focusing on numbers.
Yeah, and I tell people, you've either built it by accident or you've built it on purpose. And if you built it by accident, it's probably not going to be what you think it is. And it's just, and the other problem I think with a lot of owners is they have such a short-term mindset. Owners are really bad about, they will overestimate what they can do in a day, and they will underestimate what they can do in a week or a year. And so they don't put emphasis on long-term planning.
100%.
And culture is a long-term thing, right? Like, there's nothing you can do today that will make your culture dramatically better. It's not a single, there's things you can do that can ruin it in a day, but there's very few things you can do that are going to make this overnight. It's not a light switch. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway of all the conversations is you have to plan for it and you have to invest in it.
Yes, the investing part. And it's not just money, it's time, it's mindset, it's putting in the effort to make something work. And being willing to admit that something isn't working and pivot. So you need to try the culture thing. You need to figure out what's going to motivate your team. And it's really understanding, like we said earlier in the conversation, having conversations with your staff and knowing who they are and what's important to them, because it's going to be different for every person. And we actually talked about this before, is the workplace love languages. Like, everyone wants to be treated and celebrated differently. So it's taking that time. Middle management needs to learn their people, be able to motivate them in the right way. And that's going to add to the culture. So it is a lot of little steps all the time, every day, consistently, that's going to lead to a strong culture.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to have to find a better phrase than love language. I've heard that brought up a lot lately. It's like a new thing people talk about. But I guarantee you, if I walk into a 3-generation shop, truck repair shop, start talking about love languages, they're going to see me out the door.
No, fact. I was the one who brought it up in my company, so it was fair. But I did say to them, like, man, I'm trying to think of what I think communication styles was what we had initially led with. And then we just said, it's like a love language.
It is. It's something people can absolutely relate to. But man, I just know that that's going to be kind of a faux pas if you bring it up in some of these industries.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Mandy, thanks for being on today. I really appreciate your insight into the industry, especially the dealership side of things and how similar it is to all the other industries like heavy duty.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a pleasure. This is something I could talk about for days. I really appreciate the opportunity to continue the conversation. Thanks so much.